The corridors of Capitol Hill buzzed with the usual frenetic energy, the sounds of hurried footsteps and the murmur of staffers working behind closed doors. But there was a palpable tension in the air that day. Kash Patel, a name that carried both weight and controversy, had finally agreed to meet with Jasmine Crockett, an up-and-coming star in the Democratic Party whose political ambitions seemed limitless. Patel, known for his no-nonsense approach and sharp political insights, had been in the crosshairs of many in the political elite. But it wasn't just his reputation that had earned him a seat at the table with Crockett. No, this meeting was about something much more urgent, a truth he had been sitting on for months. As Crockett walked into the room, her expression was one of guarded confidence. She had built her career on rhetoric that appealed to the base, railing against the corruption she claimed was poisoning Washington. But today, it seemed she was about to be faced with a reality that she might not be ready to confront. Patel didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You're in trouble, Jasmine," he said bluntly, sitting across from her and locking eyes with the young congresswoman. Crockett raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback. She had expected a political dance, not a direct confrontation. "Excuse me. You've been playing the game too long, thinking your position in the party would protect you," Patel continued, leaning in. "But it's unraveling, and you're at the center of it. The people behind the scenes, your allies, are going to throw you under the bus when it suits them. They've already started." Jasmine's jaw tightened, her demeanor shifting slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." Patel's smile was cold. "The donations you've been getting, the deals you've made to climb the ladder, they aren't as clean as you think. The investigations are coming for you, and once they get hold of that information, your career will be over." The weight of Patel's words hung in the air. He wasn't just threatening her, he was revealing the cracks in her political armor. Jasmine had always thought she was untouchable, but now, for the first time, doubt crept into her mind. Jasmine Crockett's pulse quickened, and she leaned back in her chair, trying to steady herself. Her mind raced, running through every conversation, every handshake, every deal she had made in her climb to power. Patel's words echoed in her ears, a grim reminder of how quickly everything could collapse. "You're not just talking about some generic political smear, are you?" she asked, her voice slightly shaking, but she quickly masked it with defiance. "You're telling me I'm being investigated?" Patel's expression remained unreadable. "It's worse than that. They're not just investigating, you're already on their radar. Your donors, some of the people you've been cozying up to, they have a history. A history that doesn't look good under the microscope. And with your rise to prominence, those skeletons are about to be dusted off." Jasmine could feel the air closing in around her, the realization creeping in that her perfect political image was about to come crashing down. She had built her career on exposing others, on highlighting the corruption she saw in her opponents, but now she was the one in the hot seat. "How do you know all of this?" she demanded, her voice hardening. She wasn't going to let Patel see her crack, not yet. "What's your angle, Patel? Why would you come to me with this truth now?" Patel chuckled, a humorless sound. "Because I don't want to see you get destroyed. You've made enemies, Jasmine. A lot of them. But I know how to navigate this mess. The question is, do you want to learn how to save yourself?" Jasmine swallowed. Patel had a reputation for being ruthless, but he wasn't wrong. The people she had aligned herself with, the donors, the lobbyists, the shady figures in the background, could destroy her in an instant. She had always told herself that as long as she stayed ahead of the curve, played the right cards, she could outsmart them. But this was different. This wasn't about outsmarting anyone, it was about survival. Patel leaned forward, his voice low but intense. "You've been riding high on your wave of popularity, but now it's time to face reality. The dirt they've been keeping under wraps will soon be public knowledge. The question you need to ask yourself is whether you'll be the one to take the fall or if you're going to control the narrative. You think you've got it made, but you're just a pawn in a much bigger game." Jasmine felt the walls closing in, her mind reeling. She couldn't afford to let her guard down. Not now, not when everything she had worked for was on the line. "Okay," she said, her voice steady but her eyes betraying a flicker of doubt. "What do I need to do?" Patel smiled again, but this time, there was a flicker of something else, something that looked almost like respect. "First, you need to understand that the rules of the game have changed. You've been playing politics like it's a game of chess, but in Washington, it's more like a game of survival. You need to choose your allies carefully, and when the time comes, you need to be willing to cut ties with anyone who could drag you down." Jasmine nodded slowly, trying to absorb the gravity of what Patel was telling her. "So, what's your offer? Are you going to help me out of this mess, or just watch me burn?" Patel's expression hardened. "I'm offering you a chance to save yourself. Whether or not you take it is up to you." The silence between them was thick, as if the very air had been charged with the weight of what was at stake. Jasmine Crockett sat frozen in her chair, her mind scrambling to process the bombshell Patel had just dropped on her. There was no going back now. She knew she was standing on the edge of a precipice, her political future teetering in the balance. Patel studied her carefully, as if waiting for her next move. He had dropped the truth, the hard truths, right in front of her. Now, it was her turn to decide whether she would take the plunge or fight back with everything she had. "You don't have much time," Patel said, his voice cutting through the tension. "The stories about your donations, the ones that have been floating around in the background, they're going to surface. And once they do, the media will have a field day. Your political enemies will make sure of that." Jasmine's mind raced, the list of people who could bring her down growing longer with every passing second. She had known there were rumors, had heard whispers, even, but she had always thought they were just that, whispers. Now, those whispers were about to roar to life, and there was nowhere to hide. "I didn't ask for this," she muttered, almost to herself. "I didn't sign up to be a puppet." Patel leaned in, his gaze intense. "No one ever does. But the moment you entered this world, you became a player. You can't just walk away now, Jasmine. You've got to decide if you're going to be a pawn or if you're going to take control of your own destiny." Jasmine's jaw clenched. She hated feeling cornered, but the truth was staring her in the face. She had made compromises to get ahead. She had accepted money, formed alliances that were murky at best, and now those same compromises were threatening to undo everything. The very power she had fought for could be ripped away in an instant. She took a deep breath and looked Patel squarely in the eye. "What do I need to do? How do I fix this?" Patel gave a slight nod, as if he had been expecting this answer. "You need to clean house, fast. Cut the ties that are weighing you down. The people who have been using you, the ones who've been pulling your strings, those are the ones you need to sever ties with first. The longer you stay connected to them, the deeper you'll sink." Her mind whirled with names of donors, political allies, consultants. Some had been with her from the start, while others were more recent, their influence growing as she rose through the ranks. Could she really afford to turn her back on them? Was there a way to do this without losing everything? Patel's eyes darkened, as if sensing her hesitation. "You need to make a decision, Jasmine. The clock is ticking. If you wait too long, it'll be too late. Once the investigations start, it'll be all over. You'll be trapped in a scandal you won't be able to escape from." Jasmine's fingers tightened around the edge of the table, her nails digging into the wood. She could feel the weight of the choice before her, fight for control, or let it slip away. "What about you, Patel?" she asked, her voice low. "Why are you helping me? What's in it for you?" Patel leaned back, his arms crossing as he studied her with a mix of amusement and disdain. "Let's just say I don't like seeing people like you get taken down by their own mistakes. I don't like seeing anyone go down in flames if they don't have to. You're a fighter, Jasmine. I think you have what it takes to win, but you have to want it. You have to be willing to fight dirty." Her stomach churned at the thought, but there was no denying the truth in his words. She had always prided herself on being a fighter, on staying one step ahead of the game. But now, the stakes were higher than ever before. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady, though her heart pounded in her chest. "I'll clean house. I'll make the necessary cuts. But I need to know that you're going to back me up. I can't do this alone." Patel's expression softened, just slightly, as if he was assessing her resolve. "You've got a lot of work to do, but I'll be watching. If you do it right, you might just come out of this in one piece. But don't fool yourself, this isn't going to be easy. People will turn on you. They always do." Jasmine met his gaze with newfound determination. "I'm not afraid of that. I've dealt with worse." "Good," Patel said, standing up from the table. "Then let's see if you can handle the truth, Jasmine. Because this is only the beginning." The next few days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and frantic strategizing. Jasmine Crockett had gone from the calm, confident congresswoman who had been riding high on the wave of political success, to someone who now felt like she was desperately treading water. The weight of the decisions she had to make pressed down on her like a heavy blanket, suffocating her at every turn. Patel's advice echoed in her mind constantly: cut ties, and cut them fast. But who? She couldn't sever relationships with everyone, could she? Some of these people had been her allies for years. Some were still crucial to her political survival. She needed them, at least, that's what she told herself. But as the days dragged on, the truth became clearer: she didn't just need them, she had used them, just as they had used her. She began with the most obvious targets, the shady donors whose contributions had raised eyebrows but never triggered full investigations. They were her first line of defense, and they could be her downfall if she didn't act quickly. She called each of them, her heart racing with every conversation. Some of them were easy to dismiss, cutting ties with barely a protest. But there were others, powerful figures who controlled the purse strings of Washington, and they weren't so easily discarded. "I don't think you understand the position you're in, Jasmine," one of them told her over the phone. "You think you can just walk away from us? You can't. We made you, and we'll destroy you if we have to." Her blood ran cold, but she didn't flinch. "Then go ahead. Destroy me. But if you do, you'll go down with me. I'll make sure of it." The line went silent for a long moment, the tension thick between them. Finally, the voice on the other end softened. "You're making a mistake, but if you're really sure about this, we'll let you go. For now." She hung up the phone, her breath shaky but steady. She had just burned a bridge, and as much as it stung, it felt liberating. She wasn't afraid anymore. The game was changing, and she had to play it with cold precision. But as Jasmine began to sever the ties she had relied on for years, she realized that there was no going back. Each cut, each decision, felt like a small betrayal. Her allies turned into enemies, and her enemies turned into potential allies. She was caught in a whirlwind, struggling to keep up with the speed of her own unraveling. But the worst part came when the media began picking up on the whispers. The first article hit the news cycle, a low-key piece that barely scratched the surface of the scandal. But it was enough. The accusations were vague but damning enough to trigger an investigation, and once the media got wind of it, there was no stopping the avalanche. Jasmine tried to control the narrative, spinning the situation in her favor. She gave interviews, painted herself as a victim of political smear campaigns. But the more she fought, the worse it got. The press didn't believe her, and the more she tried to push back, the more they dug. Every skeleton she had buried in the past began to resurface, each new revelation more damaging than the last. The final blow came when a whistleblower from within her own camp revealed a damning piece of evidence, a secret deal she had made with a powerful lobbyist that had gone unnoticed by her colleagues until now. It was a deal that reeked of corruption and betrayal, and once it hit the press, there was no going back. Jasmine found herself alone in her office, staring at the wall as the reality of the situation settled in. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from people she thought were her friends, some offering support, others urging her to step down before things got worse. But the weight of it all pressed down on her chest like a vice. She had gambled with her career, and now it was all slipping through her fingers. In a final, desperate attempt, she reached out to Patel again. "I need your help. I've made a mess of this. What do I do now?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Patel's voice came through, steady and cold as always. "There's no saving you now, Jasmine. The game's over. But if you want to survive, you'll have to find a way to turn this into your exit strategy." Jasmine Crockett had reached the point of no return. The media was relentless, and the investigations had taken on a life of their own. Each day felt like a countdown to the inevitable collapse, the pressure squeezing her from all sides. Yet, in her desperation, one thought kept resurfacing in her mind: survival. She had burned bridges, severed connections, and fought against the wave of scrutiny with every tool at her disposal. But the more she fought, the deeper she sank into the quicksand. Every move she made seemed to only make the situation worse, and now, her own party was beginning to distance itself from her. The whispers of a possible resignation were growing louder, and the vultures were circling. She needed to do something drastic if she was going to reclaim any sense of control over her future. Patel's words echoed in her mind once again: "If you want to survive, you'll have to turn this into your exit strategy." Jasmine's hands shook as she typed out a message to her communications team, setting up a press conference for the following afternoon. She wasn't going to wait for the media to devour her, she would face them head-on, but on her terms. She would control the narrative, at least, that's what she told herself. As the hours dragged on, her team scrambled to prepare her for what was about to come. The moment she stepped onto that stage, there would be no going back. The truth would be out there, raw and unfiltered, but it had to be done. She had to make her own version of events the one the public believed, or she would lose everything. The press conference was scheduled for 3 p.m., and as Jasmine walked to the podium, she could feel the weight of every single eye in the room upon her. The cameras flashed, capturing every detail of her expression. This was it, the moment that would define the rest of her career. She cleared her throat, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "Thank you for coming," she began, her eyes scanning the crowd. "I've asked you all here today because I owe the American people the truth. For months, I've been the subject of baseless attacks and allegations. But I'm here to tell you that these accusations don't define who I am." There was a pause as she let the words settle. She could feel the tension building in the room. This wasn't going to be an easy sell, but she had no other choice. "I've worked hard for my career," she continued, her voice growing firmer. "I've fought against the corruption in Washington, against those who would use power for their own gain. But yes, I've made mistakes. We all have. I've made deals, I've taken donations, and I've worked with people I shouldn't have. But I did it because I believed it was the only way to change this broken system. I believed it was the only way to make a difference." She paused again, letting her words linger, letting the weight of her confession hang in the air. This was the moment of truth. But it wasn't the kind of truth she had feared. It wasn't the full, damning reality that would completely destroy her, it was a version of the truth that, if spun right, could shift the narrative. She would show the world that she wasn't a victim, but a fighter. A woman who had been forced to play the game by its rules, even when she didn't want to. "I've learned a lot in these last few weeks. I've learned that power comes with a price, and sometimes, that price is higher than we're willing to pay," Jasmine continued, her tone somber. "But I'm not going to stand here and let this define me. I'm going to fight for the change I promised. I'll fight for the people who put their trust in me. And I'll fight for a future where our leaders are held accountable, where we can all work together, without the influence of money and corruption pulling the strings behind the scenes." The crowd was silent for a moment, processing her words. Then, as if on cue, the questions began flying from every direction. "But what about the lobbyists? What about the shady deals you've been involved in? One reporter called out. Jasmine didn't flinch. She had expected this. I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes, but I'm owning them. I'm doing everything I can to make things right. I'm taking steps to ensure that my past actions won't define my future. And that starts with accountability, starting with myself. Another reporter pressed her further. Do you think the public can trust you after everything that's come out? How can they believe you? Jasmine took a deep breath. I understand the skepticism. But I can't change the past. What I can do is work harder than ever to earn back your trust. And that's exactly what I plan to do. I'm not going to let this scandal end my career. I'm going to use it to fuel the change this country needs. As the questions continued, the journalists seemed to soften slightly. Jasmine was still in the fight, still holding her ground. It wasn't over, not yet. She was in damage control mode, trying to salvage what she could. But even as the press conference came to a close, one thing was clear: her future was no longer in her hands alone. The public's opinion would decide whether she would rise from the ashes or be consumed by them. As Jasmine walked off the stage, she found herself face to face with Patel once again. His expression was unreadable, but there was a hint of approval in his eyes. You did what you had to do, he said. But don't get too comfortable. You may have controlled the narrative today, but the real test is yet to come. Jasmine Crockett knew that what she had just done, standing in front of the cameras and owning her mistakes, was only the beginning of the long battle ahead. The press conference had been a calculated risk, and while it had bought her some time, it had also set her on a new, more dangerous path. The questions about her integrity were still there, and the whispers in Washington hadn't stopped. In fact, if anything, they were getting louder. Her phone buzzed constantly in the days that followed, some messages offering encouragement, others filled with veiled threats and reminders of the people she had alienated. She had expected the media backlash, but what she didn't expect was the growing divide within her own party. Her colleagues, once eager to bask in her rise, now kept their distance. It was as if the scent of scandal had turned them all into wary animals, circling around her, waiting to see if she would fall or if they could use her weakness to their advantage. But it was the phone call she received the morning after the press conference that truly made her realize how deep the trouble went. The voice on the other end was familiar, but cold. You made your move, Jasmine. Now you have to deal with the consequences. It was a prominent member of her party, someone who had helped her when she was first starting out. Someone she thought she could count on. What are you talking about? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. You think you can just control the narrative, make a few apologies, and walk away from all this unscathed? The voice chuckled, but there was no humor in it. That's not how it works. You've lost the trust of too many people, Jasmine. And you're not just going to be thrown under the bus by the other side. Your own people are looking for a way to get rid of you. Jasmine's heart pounded as she listened to the cold truth. She had known it was coming, but hearing it directly from someone within her own party made it all the more real. What do you want me to do? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I want you to step down, voluntarily. Publicly. Resign and save whatever shred of dignity you have left before the opposition drags you through the mud. If you don't, they will. And it won't be pretty. The line went dead. Jasmine stared at the phone in her hand, the weight of the conversation settling over her. Resign. Was that really the only option left? She had built her career on being bold, on fighting against the system. Now, the system was closing in on her, and the walls were closing fast. That afternoon, she met with Patel once again. She knew there was no one else she could turn to for guidance. As much as she hated admitting it, he was right, he had seen this coming long before she had. What now? She asked, her voice tinged with frustration as she sat down across from him. I've done everything I can to control the narrative, but it's not enough. The people who matter are turning their backs on me. Patel didn't waste any time with sympathy. I told you that playing this game would cost you. You're not just fighting for your political survival now, you're fighting for your future, for your career. And if you want to stay in this game, you're going to have to be ruthless. Jasmine clenched her fists. What do you mean, ruthless? I mean that you need to stop playing defense and start playing offense. You've been on the back foot, reacting to everything. You need to turn the tables and make them react to you. Jasmine was silent for a moment, absorbing his words. How? Patel leaned forward, his voice steady and calculated. The people who are threatening your career, the ones pushing you toward resignation, they think they have control. But what they don't realize is that you still have leverage. You need to find a way to make them regret trying to push you out. You need to create a situation where they're the ones who will lose if you go down. Jasmine frowned, confused. How do I do that? What's the leverage? Patel's smile was dark. You've got skeletons, Jasmine. Everyone in this town does. You just need to decide if you're ready to use yours. Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. The idea of using her own secrets against those who had betrayed her was a dangerous proposition, but she couldn't deny the appeal of taking control once again. This wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about making sure those who had turned against her paid the price. You want me to go after my own party? She asked, her voice low. Not just your party, Patel replied. Go after everyone who's been part of this system of corruption. Use the truth as a weapon, Jasmine. Use it to make sure they never forget who you are. Jasmine stood up, her resolve hardening. I'll do whatever it takes. I'm not going down without a fight. Patel nodded approvingly. That's the spirit. But remember, once you make this move, there's no turning back. You'll be a target from all sides. Are you ready for that? Jasmine looked at him, her eyes filled with determination. I'm ready. Jasmine Crockett had made her decision. There was no turning back now. The battle for her future had gone beyond saving face or controlling the narrative, it was now about survival. She was no longer just fighting to save her career, she was preparing to go on the offensive, and she would do whatever it took to make sure those who had turned against her felt the full weight of their actions. Patel's advice echoed in her mind, use the truth as a weapon. It wasn't a line she ever thought she'd hear herself say, but as the days passed and the pressure mounted, it became clear that this was her only choice. If she was going to take down the people who had tried to sabotage her, she would need to make them regret ever thinking they could outplay her. The first move was straightforward. She began to leak the information to trusted journalists, small, careful leaks that painted a picture of the deals, backroom negotiations, and under-the-table alliances that had been the lifeblood of Washington's corrupt political system. She had gathered evidence over the years, keeping meticulous records of shady meetings, phone calls, and financial transactions. Now, it was all coming to light, one piece at a time. The media picked up on it quickly, and before long, the story had snowballed. What started as a small ripple became a tidal wave. The public began to turn against the very people who had once tried to dictate her fate. They had underestimated her, thinking she was just another player in the game. But Jasmine had proven them wrong. She wasn't just a survivor, she was a force to be reckoned with. But she didn't stop there. Jasmine had one final ace up her sleeve, her own party. The same individuals who had encouraged her to resign now found themselves on the receiving end of a political storm. She released confidential documents, revealing that some of her closest allies had been involved in their own shady dealings, lining their pockets with money from the same donors they had condemned. It was a betrayal of the highest order, and Jasmine knew it would be the scandal that would shake Washington to its core. Her phone rang off the hook, but this time, it was different. People weren't calling to warn her, they were calling to ask for her help. Those who had once distanced themselves were now begging for her favor. They needed her to keep quiet. They needed her to let them save face. But Jasmine had one answer for them, no. As the weeks passed, the fallout from the scandal reached a boiling point. Calls for resignations came from every corner of the political landscape, but this time, it wasn't just directed at her. Her former allies were being dragged into the mud with her. Some of them chose to step down quietly, their careers irreparably damaged. Others fought back, trying to maintain their positions, but the public was already lost. They had seen too much. Jasmine Crockett stood at the center of it all, unbowed. Her press conferences became a regular occurrence, and each time she spoke, her words carried more weight. She was no longer the target of scandalous accusations. She was the one holding the power, dictating the narrative. It had been a hard, brutal fight, but Jasmine had emerged victorious. She had not only saved her career, but she had also reshaped the political landscape. She had exposed the deep corruption that ran through Washington's halls, and in doing so, she had earned the respect of the very people who had once sought to destroy her. The final blow came when the investigation into her dealings was officially closed. The charges were dropped, and while the damage had been done, the media found themselves scrambling to explain how they had gotten it so wrong. They had underestimated her resilience, her ability to rise from the ashes. Patel, ever the strategist, watched from the sidelines, a rare smirk tugging at his lips as Jasmine stood victorious. "You did it," he said, his voice tinged with admiration. "You played the game, and you came out on top." Jasmine met his gaze, a smile creeping onto her own lips. "I didn't just play the game. I changed it."